live for the 1 o'clock talk that I'm now half an hour late for. So if anyone is there, I do apologize for being late. I completely wrote the wrong time down, and which leads to my intro. And I would say perfectly that all the information that I'm going to be presenting today is not from that of an expert. In fact, I am quite the opposite. I'm just a dummy. I'm just a pediatric chiropractor who was so stupid during the pandemic that he never watched the news. So the information I'm going to present today is based on that experience of not watching the news and making decisions based on my own values and my own belief systems without being influenced by social media or news agencies and or everybody in between. And I had this little belief system that in order to be healthy, we just simply be healthy, which means to have a solid brain to body communication, eat good, move good, think good, and then enjoy your life. And I was notified that that was incorrect during the pandemic. And I was told that the way to be healthy with an unstoppable virus that everyone was going to get and it wasn't preventable was to do the opposite of what I thought was being healthy, which was to lock ourselves into our homes, isolate, and then order takeout food, smoke a lot of weed, and wear fabric over our face until we can inject ourselves with random chemicals. I didn't know. I was so stupid. I didn't know that what I was going to do was wrong. I didn't know that what I was going to do was impossible. I didn't know that I simply by not wearing a mask and taking care of patients, I would see over 180,000 patient visits during the pandemic without a single transmission of COVID within my office or any one hospitalized or any chronic illness. I didn't know. I was just too stupid. I was too much of a dummy. And I didn't know that when I made this talk that I would get messages like the one I'm gonna read right now. For people who have not done this talk, this is the second time I've done this talk. For people who have not heard the information I'm about to present, I didn't know what they told me, which was your misinformation kills kids. You must be very proud. And vaccines have saved countless lives all over the world. To say that they don't goes against modern scientific and medical knowledge. You don't have to agree with it, but to try to convince others is disingenuous. I didn't know these things because I'm just a big dummy. I'm just someone that had better health stats than any other health facility in Washington state, to my knowledge, and was investigated by multiple government agencies. Then they found out the same thing. But did that matter to them? No, it did not matter. It didn't matter that I successfully kept all my patients and my family and their families healthy and safe from the unstoppable virus. They didn't care, which leads to this talk, is walking away from vaccine culture and then go in peace. Because what I found is through this whole experience, I've tried to be smart and explain things scientifically. I tried to be right by being right. And I've tried to educate people that have a different belief system than I do. And what I found was that I would simply be wrong. Even though I was right, I was still wrong. So I would like to spare you the same suffering that I have, because really this isn't an anti-vaccine talk. This isn't a make your choice talk. Let's be honest. There is a whisper in a certain percentage of the population that says, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem right to inject chemicals into my kids. It doesn't seem right that chemicals that would be classified as poisonous would be good for my kids. It just doesn't seem right. You don't need convincing of this. I think God is already speaking to you. So I'm not anti anything. I'm just talking to the people that are already being spoken to, that they have this feeling of like, this isn't right. I don't want to do this. To save you the heartache of what I've experienced of trying to argue or debate or educate, because at the end of the day, the people that believe differently than what you believe and than what I believe, they don't care. They don't respect you. They don't care about you. They certainly don't love you. And you will never be smart in their eyes because you're different. Which leads us into the presentation. So what defines a cult? Well, there is the absolute unquestionable authority. And And I'm not saying that anything within our culture right now fits this category. I'm just going to go ahead and just let you use your own thought process to see, like, does this fit? Number two definition of a cult is they use coercion. They use fear, shame to prevent leaving. They demand isolation. They kind of label us versus them. It's a funny thing. I didn't realize when during the pandemic I was simply going to just keep doing the things I always did, which meant I don't wear a mask usually. In fact, I have this sensory sensitivity on my face from going through a high-speed car accident and hit my face into the ground where my facial nerves have become sensitized. I don't even like wearing a scarf. I can't even do it. It drives me crazy. I wouldn't call myself an anti-scarf person, and I wouldn't have called myself an anti-mask person. However, I was given that label by a large percentage of the population. I was all of a sudden different than them because I did not do the thing that the leaders of that group told me to do. I was against them, even though I was the same. One day I was the same as them. The next day I was against them, although I didn't change. And then there's the whole secretive hidden agendas thing. And again, I'll let you make up your own mind. And I just gotta say, one of these things I remember learning in school. I don't remember what grade it was. If it looks like a duck, if it sounds like a duck, and walks like a duck, then maybe it's a duck. So what is the vaccine culture? Well, it comes down to a basic principle, the culture. There is a artificial defense. So, for example, I get these shots for my baby so they do not die. And that was a general belief system that we had as a population, I think, when it came to vaccines, until we all were alive. And then a lot of people put their faith in this definition that we had, which is you get this vaccine, and then you don't get whatever the nasty thing is, and then you don't die, and then you don't spread it to other people because it's like a holy thing too. And I remember everyone kind of believed in that definition. In fact, I remembered I was president of Rotary at the time, and I remember sitting in a board meeting with the admin of the local hospital, and one of the other board members is saying, "This vaccine's coming out, and it's going to solve all the problems." And I remember this admin of the hospital, this person who's in charge, she goes, "We just need people to believe in it." And it didn't make sense at that point, because at this point I already have the belief system that you get a vaccine, you don't get the thing, and you don't spread it to other people. That's kind of the whole thing. That's the reason why they make people do it, not for yourself, for other people. And then what did we learn? Well, we learned, actually, if we move down to the second point, this artificial defense, is that no. I mean, sure, we fired a bunch of people and they lost, their livelihood and their career and their sole purpose in life, but so they wouldn't spread this thing to other people by getting these vaccines. No. Vaccines don't do that. No, they don't. We never said that. What they do is they make it so you don't have as many symptoms. So you, again, don't die, and the symptoms aren't as bad. And remember that shift in conversation that occurred? Like, wait a minute. Like, people lost their jobs. They didn't lose their jobs because you were concerned about them getting more or less sick. This is defense of, I don't want to have bad symptoms. And then there's this artificial defense of, like, just in case. I want to avoid this thing. Versus, if you look at the natural response of the human body that outlasted all other species on our planet, when there's an exposure to something, for example, in this case, this conversation around immunology, exposure to viruses, bacteria, and then there's this natural response where the body gets stronger afterwards. Well, for example, there's populations in northern Canada that don't do certain vaccinations, and they have a decreased risk in a lot of chronic illnesses that are common in the United States, one of them being glioblastomas or brain tumors with the chickenpox vaccine. And so there's this idea of, okay, you get exposed to something and then you get stronger. And then that protects you later on. Well, the argument is, well, if you die, it doesn't do much good. Yeah, no, I know. I get it. It's scary. Don't want to die. I get that. But this idea of a natural response is you get exposed to something, then you get stronger. In fact, this is something teachers used to brag about before their unions were bought and paid for by medicine, is that they have the strongest immune system because they deal with kids all day long. Now it's kids stay home so they don't spread it to everyone else. We have to avoid it. And then, which brings down to the second point, which symptoms are actually good. A fever is good. In fact, fevers do their job, which is increase the temperature of our body in order to burn off the thing. And they typically do their job efficiently, unless for some reason that child has a modified immune response. And what could they have gotten a modified immune response from? I don't know. Probably just coincidence. But symptoms are our body's natural ability of doing its job. If you work out and the next day you wake up and you are sore, that is good. And then this natural response is also that we kind of do things just in case we need to be strong. In fact, this is in essence, the root of our entire species is that we want to be strong providers for our women, our family as men, and women want to be strong in order to be good caretakers for their kids. That's how our species existed. And the strong would then have strong families. We do things just in case we need to be strong. I work out so I can do the things I want to do later. And then really, this vaccine culture, relationships are based on fear over future. And when I say fear, what I mean is false experiences appearing real. I was told in the beginning of the pandemic, I was a murderer and I was going to kill countless people. I was going to be the reason why patients died. I was going to be the reason why there was chronic hospitalizations. I was told there was no way, unless I put a piece of fabric over my face, that outcome was not inevitable. And I felt that anxiety and that responsibility. But it was false. It was a false experience that appeared very real, didn't it? And that's what the difference between a natural culture where people play versus an artificial culture, a vaccine culture where people are on defense, is that relationship are based on fear over future, just in case, versus I want to do this thing later on and I want to be prepared for it and stronger. So this is by Dr. Janja Lalich and Stephen Hassan. Probably butchered those names, so I do apologize. And they describe the three main challenges of leaving a cult, which is phobia, indoctrination. Literally, you will die if you leave this group. Number two, loss of community. And I get this one. I actually get all three of them because I had quite the community around me going into the pandemic. I was the president of Rotary. I was president of the clubhouse at Seven Lakes, which was a community center. I was president of the Runners Club. I served on multiple board of directors. I helped build parks. I helped renovate community centers, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for nonprofit organizations. I had tons of community connections. I had a super intact, loving community I was part of. And then I found out in a board meeting for Rotary specifically, where every person sitting in a room told me, as we're sitting in a room without masks on, that I needed to put a mask on, even though they knew that this was all for show. Hospital administrators, they knew. School board members, they knew. Everyone knew it was a show. And I realized at that point, they were saying, either you're part of our group, you're part of our cult, you're part of our culture, which is when we're told to do something that goes against our belief systems, we do it anyways. Or you lose that community. And I get what that feels like to have an entire community, that people that you love, that you cared about, that you were connected with. But when it came down to it, in order to be part of that community, I had to stay within this paradigm, which was artificial defense. And then this pragmatic paralysis, which is stuck in the what ifs. What if I leave? What are these people going to think of me? What's this person going to think of me? And we're going to talk about the neuroanatomy involved in that, and how those centers within the brains are actually wired into the brain, and then how that then keeps people stuck in that sense of pragmatic paralysis, weighing outcomes, indecisiveness. So if you look at these three main areas of the challenges of leaving a cult, it's easy to understand why, answer the question of why does anyone keep doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome? So let's jump into the neuroanatomy that's involved in explaining that. Because we all have two automatic nervous system responses. We have the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, the survival mode. And then you have the rest and digest, or rest, digest, develop, heal mode. So for shorthand on the slide, I put that in as 4F versus R&D. And in an ideal world, we have a balance in between these two automatic nervous system responses. And these responses have served our species well, because think back a couple 100,000 years ago, we'd be out in nature. We don't have tools. We don't have fire. We don't have weapons. We just have our crew of people that were around watching out. And all of a sudden, someone sees a tiger. And then immediately the fight or flight response kicks in. So I pose this question in my clinic often. What would you do? You see a tiger. Do you fight or you flight? Well, you flight, because we don't have weapons or tools, or so we'd run away. So we have this adrenaline response. Fight or flight kicks in. All of a sudden, digestion shuts down. Higher cognitive functioning shuts down, because the body only cares about one thing: get away from the danger. And healing shuts down. You don't need to heal when there's a danger in front of us, because if we get eaten by the tiger, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how healed up we are. We are dead, and we are lunch. So we get away from the tiger, and we'd run away. So the adrenaline response, this fight or flight, freeze, fawn response, really is only meant to be about a 30-second to a minute to 2 minutes interaction. And then we get away from the tiger. Phew. And then an R&D kicks into place. And what the R&D does is it wires us for survival. Okay, so it says, hey, what did we just do that led to survival? Yes, let's do that, but let's do it better. So we just tore up our feet. Let's go ahead and thicken up the feet. Let's build some calluses. We just ran away. It'd be better if we run away faster, so let's increase our oxygen capacity in our lungs. Perfect. Let's strengthen our heart so we can pump blood faster. Let's go ahead and strengthen the muscles in the legs in order to then get away from the tigers faster. And by the way, let's go ahead and get better at identifying where tigers are. Because what's better? What's better is waiting until there's a tiger in camp and then running away? Or is it better to be able to spot a tiger from across the field? Or is it better to see signs of a tiger and know the tiger's in the area and then avoid that area? Let's get better at identifying where tigers are. And there's 3 pieces of neuroanatomy. And if you're taking notes, this is a good time to take notes, because I'm going to break down. There's a lot to go into in these slides. So there's the first part is the main sensory input to the brain. And it controls 80% of our sensory to the brain, and that is the vagus nerve. And there are 2 branches of the vagus nerve. There is the ventral vagal, which is in front, and then there is the dorsal vagal, which is in back. So the ventral vagal is the healing, circulation, peace, rev the stress response down. I feel good. I feel comfortable. I feel happy. I feel at ease. I feel comfortable. Ventral vagal is kind of like the flow state nerve. And then you have the dorsal vagal branch. And the dorsal vagal branch is the part of our vagus nerve that tells our body to stay, to just stay where you are, wait until it's safe. And so it shuts down digestion, tightens up the muscles in the back by activating the spinal accessory nerve, and gives you this sense of just arresting tension within the body. So vagus nerve. Then that vagus nerve sends a sensory information to the brain. And then it has two main options. And again, I'm dumbing this down for very simplistic conversation's sake. There is the prefrontal cortex, which is the rest, digest, develop, heal part of the brain, and which is also known as the God center of the brain. It is the hypothesis that when in the Bible it talks about we were made in the image of God, that's the part of they're talking about is our brain, because it's unique to Homo sapiens, our species, compared to every other animal. And it's also the part of our brain that is advanced sequential planning. If I do A, then B, C, D, E, X, E will happen. So prefrontal cortex, healing part of the brain, smart supercomputer part of the brain. And then the opposite of that, the 4F part of the brain, is the amygdala, which is the emotional part of the brain, reactive and feelings part of the brain, but typically negative feelings. And then you have the reticular activating system. So the reticular activating system is what automates it. If you've ever been driving home and then you all of a sudden you just notice, oh wow, got home already. How did I get here so fast? It's kind of zoned out there. That's because if you've done something over and over enough times, the reticular activating system says, okay, we're going to take this out of our hardware, using a lot of energy space, and then put it in the background so it makes it easy. Puts it on autopilot. And so everything that is done with repetition then becomes autopiloted. So for example, in the vagus nerve, you've this stress response. It says, okay, tell the brain, turn on that amygdala, get that fight or flight part of the brain going. We're in danger mode. And then it just never goes away. Then the reticular activating system says, okay, we need to stay in this mode because this danger has not gone away. The equation never gets balanced. And there's three things that activate this 4F mode. It's the synthetic environment. And the reason for that, and everything outside of nature would be considered a synthetic stimuli to the nervous system. So our species have existed for 300,000 years in nature. That is what is normal. And so if you've heard that camping is good for you, that hiking is good for you, that going on walks outside, grounding is good for you, all those things are quote unquote good for you because that is our natural environment that our brain quote unquote feels at home in and can heal. Anything outside of that, the 4F system says, yeah, we need to be on guard because something's not quite right here. So better keep yourself in that ready to go mode, stress mode. Second thing is inactivity. So inactivity is, before the pandemic, everything we learned about in chiropractic college is sitting is the new smoking. That's one of the reasons I was like, is this complete idiocy? Because everything, all continuing education for a decade is sitting is the new smoking. Sitting increased the risk of death and disease of all types across the board, regardless of exercise level. Sitting, and then we have this unstoppable virus that didn't affect healthy people. And what are we told to do? We're told to sit. It didn't make sense. So the reason is because sitting also activates this 4F response, because if we were sitting in nature, we would be prey. So the nervous system says, be on guard, be ready for something dangerous to happen. And then the third is negativity, because we would be a community species. We need people to survive. We would rely on our people around us to survive. If any of those people were negative towards us, then that would mean that we would be at risk. So now, when you look at the balance of this with this R&D versus the 4F, does it make sense that the 4F system is significantly stronger than the R&D? And that explains why people stay the way they are. In fact, and that's why I've even simplified this terminology down even further from 4F and R&D to stay mode versus play mode. Because vaccine culture is simply a culture of neurological imbalance. And this is what it looks like. This is the cycle. And I got to ask yourself, if you find yourself in this status of anxiety, followed by exhaustion, followed by being guarded all the time, followed by more anxiety. And so really any mental, physical, emotional challenges are what is causing us to stay in this status versus being able to just play. And now kids, I was gonna say kids, kids, they run and play and do these things, but kids really don't do that anymore, do they? They kind of are stuck on technology, was again the synthetic stimuli, which is then increasing the overdevelopment of this part of the brain. And this is now quite a common conversation piece with autism, and the idea of like, oh, autism's caused by vaccinations, or autism's caused by Tylenol. It's autism is simply a description of symptoms from an overactive amygdala, an overactive dorsal vagal nerve, because of the things that engage that neuroanatomy. So it makes sense if the mom's under a lot of stress, that baby's nervous system develops to be in that overactivated state. And then you then inject them with synthetic chemicals and then give them synthetic chemicals while the mom's pregnant. Of course, that is the byproduct. The byproduct is this imbalanced neuroanatomy. And what does a child with autism symptoms do? They hunker down. They overreact. They be overwhelmed. They stay locked down, lock in, versus playing. It's a culture of imbalance. And then we can further dive into the neuroanatomy of this imbalance, which all of this again is for you to have the tools of understanding, because when you have understanding, then you can take control and take your power back. When you don't understand, then it's just subject to whatever the people around you are talking about. And so with the overactivation of stay mode, there is a underactivation of other parts of the brain. So for example, if you go to the gym and you lift bicep curls over and over, and you allow time for rest and your muscles can recover from the damage to your bicep, what happens to your bicep? Your bicep gets stronger, right? And that's a basic rule with every part of our body. Whatever we use with repetition and challenge becomes strengthened and then used more often. So when you have a overstimulation or imbalanced stimulation of the stay mode neuroanatomy, you have a decrease in your temporal lobes. And I ended up actually getting an EEG machine because I was highly motivated. I started off this conversation as a dummy, and that's what I'm going to maintain with my status. But I became a dummy that was highly motivated to learn more, because as I was continuing to exist how I existed before the pandemic, and then the good people that I had taken care of in Washington State that tend to vote a certain way, then all of a sudden thought that I was a danger to humanity, and they reported me to the government. So then I was under this investigation by the government, and I had to then explain my reasoning of why the decisions I made. But then I was also on a kind of on a quest to understand what was going on with our friends and people that I cared about, because our friends' marriages fell apart. Our friends' addictions went crazy. I was looking at stats. Suicide was through the roof. Spousal abuse, and everyone kind of joked it off. It's like, oh yeah, you put people in a room together and they hate each other. I'm like, I put me in a room with my family. I love spending time with my family. In fact, we've spent the last 2 years living in the Dominican Republic with my family, and no one else speaks English. I've loved it. I haven't felt the desire to abuse them. But that was kind of the joke. Did you ever hear that? Oh yeah, it's because they actually hate each other. What? How is that an acceptable answer? So I get this EEG machine which measures electrical activity of the brain, so you can measure parts of the brain that were being used and which ones were not being used. And temporal lobes, which is the part of our brain that process hearing and auditory comprehension, have been diminished. And the reason for this is because if you are in a 4F mode, stay mode, your brain's like, okay, we're in survival mode. We don't need to take in auditory information. We don't need to process auditory information. We just need to watch and then react. Okay. So it down regulates the temporal lobe. Have you ever been in a conversation or an argument with anybody where this person is just not understanding what I'm saying to them, and they don't think that you're understanding them either? You're not listening to me. It's because you decreased auditory processing. Second part is the hippocampus. This is the part of our brain that processes short-term memory, accurate memory, and recall based on emotional stimuli. So it seemed like there was a couple camps in the beginning of the pandemic where it was camp number one was like, it's just going to be 2 weeks. We're just going to close down for 2 weeks, guys. It's not a big deal. Just close your businesses, just go home. And then there was like a other group of people that were what were called the conspiracy theorists. They're like, no, 2 weeks are going to turn into 2 months, which is going to turn into 2 years. It's going to be vaccine passports. It's going to be all these things. And the other people were like, no, it's definitely going to be just 2 weeks. Not a big deal. And then 2 weeks came, and then it was like, okay, it's going to be another 2 weeks. And they're like, of course it is. Like, yeah, of course. And then after that, it's got to be another month. Well, of course it's going to be another month. And it's almost as if the memory was modified. Because the idea of this is going to be a long-term thing was like, that is ridiculous to these people. But a couple weeks at a time, all of a sudden, yeah, of course. And it is also in the same instance. If you've ever been in an argument with somebody and they're like, I never said that. Okay, well, yeah, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. I don't know, because the hippocampus, in case you're noticing a trend, basically this is everyone's neuroanatomy to a degree. And the best way to sum it up is for the hippocampus is if you've ever been like a blacked out drunk, that alcohol directly inhibits the hippocampus and the temporal lobes and the prefrontal cortex. But it does it tangibly. So anyone who's been blacked out drunk will say, I didn't know what I was doing. But in actuality, they knew what they were doing. They knew. They just didn't have their hippocampus storing memory, so they didn't remember it. And they have no memory of it. And the third part of the neuroanatomy that is decreased is the substantia nigra. So substantia nigra is the dopamine producing part of our brain. It is what gives us our joy, is what gives us our happiness, gives us our clean energy. Where the amygdala, it floods our body with stress hormones, but they're very highly toxic and they're highly corrosive. Where dopamine's clean energy. It is good all day long, and it is our main driver for reproduction and also for acquisition of food and security. Problem is, when we have overactivation of the stay mode, 4F mode, then we're running off these stress hormones, and then the substantia nigra is not really utilized, so it becomes atrophied. And then technology also weakens it. So does processed food, so does medication. All these things weaken the substantia nigra. And the substantia nigra, dopamine, is the basic building block for motor control. Also, Parkinson's disease is a substantia nigra atrophy. And now what we're seeing is people in their 30s and 40s developing Parkinson's because of this atrophy within the substantia nigra. And which we've already talked about, the amygdala, heightened emotional experience, increase in internal dialogue. And again, back to that internal dialogue that is associated with negativity. That is amygdala, and it's telling you, watch out for anyone that's different. This is why, and it's going to tell you the reason why. Like, they're bad, and they're bad for this reason. For example, my quotes that I read as I started this talk, they haven't even heard the information that I'm going to present. They have no idea, but they know that I'm different for them because I dared insinuated the thing that they're part of possibly could not be perfect. That amygdala, they made that connection of what exactly I was going to say and then jumped to the attack on it. And their amygdala is telling them exactly to do it. So anytime you have an internal dialogue that's negative, that is your amygdala. Your amygdala is looking for somebody different in order to protect you. And now we can Now we can see why so many people stay in this. Oops, dropped my mic. Sorry about that. Stay in this vaccine culture, and they have every right to and every reason to, because they they are they're already not healthy, right? So then people have this idea of like, well, I'm already not healthy, so I guess I got to use these tools in order to then not get more unhealthy. They're already sick. They don't know how to be healthy. Maybe you're in this situation where you're like, I don't want to be using these chemicals. I don't want to be injecting my kids in chemicals, but I'm already sick. I'm already not healthy. I don't want to get more sick, which then leads to schedule. And I don't have the time to do the things to be healthy, so I will just use these tools that are available to me and stay within this culture that I've created. And I don't have time to get sick either. So, yeah, okay, minimize my symptoms. Yeah, sure, that may set me up for some chronic illness later on, but I don't have time right now to be sick. And then we already hit on the social issue. And this is why so many people stay within this culture, even though inside they have this whisper of like, this isn't right. It's not right for me. But where I've noticed it the most strongest is with their kids, where that's where people are willing to do something differently, because themselves, they're like, okay, well, I'm already bad, but my kids, like, their future is dependent on you. And this is a simple truth. This is what you are called when you walk away from the vaccine culture. You're called anti-vax. You're called stupid. You're called anti-science. You're called delusional. You're called bad parent, conspiracy theorist, anti-mask, selfish. Okay, so there's more words here. These are just the PC ones. I've been called all of them, and with enthusiasm during the pandemic, after the pandemic, and again, my thought was, with these poor people included in the government, as the government was investigating me also, they just need more information. They need to see that I'm actually not stupid. This is a sound strategy that I'm using, and the outcomes are good health. That I'm not anti-science. Actually, here's all the science behind what I said. That I'm not delusional, because this is the data that I've collected. My kids are healthier than every person I know's kids. So I don't know how I can be a bad parent. It doesn't seem to be a conspiracy when it just seems to be true. I'm not anti-mask. I'm just a person that doesn't like scarves. And I'm not being selfish. I'm demonstrating to everybody else how to be healthy. But do you see what just happened? The vaccine culture relies on defense. So in essence, when you walk away and you are called all these things, what do? We try to defend ourselves, which then keeps us locked into the culture. And so what I would like to do is give you a piece of information, because this is the truth I had to come to in order to break the cycle of feeling the need to defend myself. Because I discovered what you are. And there's a statement, there's a verse in the Bible that says a tree is known by its fruit. So, for example, it doesn't matter who you are. If you go to a tree and you find an apple, you can conclude this is an apple tree. If you go to see a pear, it's a pear tree. See cherries on it, it's a cherry tree. Figs, fig tree. Right, you get my point. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It doesn't matter what anyone's opinion are. Someone could say, hey, look at that tree without fruit on it. And then now it's like, well, we don't know for sure. But once the fruit's there, it's pretty definitive, isn't it? So what I've found is that people that are going to be called to this message, and I'm on lots of groups, they are people that call out snakes, right? They call it out. They're using their studies. They are using their data. They're using their research. And they are calling out these liars that profit off of people being sick. They call them out with enthusiasm. Okay, is that you? And then there's this right alongside of this eagerness to like heal themselves of being healthy, being autonomous, being sovereign. And then there's also this desire to serve others. And most of the people that I see on these sites, I mean, they're posting and they're sharing information because they're trying to give it to other people to help other people have healthier, happier lives. They're serving. And they don't do it to harm other people. They do it to heal them. So I've tried to find the word that best describes these people, and I ended up seeing this sign. So if you look at this picture on the bottom, these are all over Rome, and it's two Greek letters. It is what's called it looks like an X, and then there's one that looks like a P, and they're put together. And what this the symbol is a Cairo. And so this symbol was the original symbol for Christ. You see, regardless of what anyone calls you, anti this, stupid, delusional, bad parent, what you are is you are someone who is embodying the disciplines of Christ. You know, I have to use the word Cairo because the word Christian is not accurate anymore, because I see these tendencies only in this certain population that would be drawn to this message. I didn't see this in my church. My church shut down. My church, I remember my pastor came into my office wearing a mask, and I was like, "What are you doing, dude?" And he said, "I wear this to make other people feel comfortable." I said, "I don't to show other people the example that Christ showed." And his response to me was, "Well, our donations have been better than ever." So make no doubt about it. Like, you are a walking, talking billboard for Christ's example, whether you know it or not. And I have told this to many people that say, "Well, I don't consider myself a follower of Jesus." No matter. You are. Because you are known. A tree is known by its fruit. So then, what's the solution to this? The whole go in peace, walking away from the vaccine culture, is you really got to learn to play again. Like, think about the last time you like played. It's like a kid, like running on the beach, having fun, playing with other kids. We do mission work in the Dominican Republic, and we take our kids in some of the poorest villages in the world, and where I give free care. And my kids that are these blonde little white kids, I'm going to show on the slide, go and just play with kids of different skin color that speak multiple different languages, Creole, which is the Haitians, and then Spanish is the Dominican children, and they just know to play. And so learning to play again, it really is about balancing the 4F and the R&D, nervous system. So really what it comes down to is we got plenty of 4F. We need to increase our R&D. And so the question that people ask, well, how long does this take? It takes 2 weeks. It takes 2 weeks to rewire the nervous system, to start to balance the neuroanatomy, which makes a lot of sense why it was 2 weeks to stop the spread, because the changes that occur form the new identity. In fact, the prefrontal cortex is where we form our identity. It's a part of our brain that is turned on with R&D. So this is the cycle to attack. Get your time right, get your mind right, and get your spine right. Activation of the brain comes from movement within the spine, 90% of it. Remember the whole sitting is the new smoking, inactivity is one of the main things. It's opposite. Movement and moving differently is what activates our brain, turns on the R&D center. But this is the vicious cycle that we have to break. I don't know how many times, which is then something we tell ourselves, which is then leads us to being exhausted and anxious and depressed, which then leads us to being like, I don't have any time to do the thing I need to do, which then reinforces the thing. So how do we rewire this nervous system response that is so out of balance. 2 weeks at a time, of course. But I want to explain something because of the why. I've been called a lot of names. I've been accused of a lot of awful things. And because I continued to act the same way once the pandemic hit. And the reason why I did that was a couple-fold. Did I like arguing with people nonstop? No. Did I like being threatened by the government for fines and jail time? No. Did I like having to have my team crumble because of the stress as the government was harassing them? No. Did I want to lose all my friends because I wouldn't wear a piece of fabric over my face? No. Did I want to do all that? No, I did not want to do that. But I tell you what I did want to do. I had a conversation with my wife in the beginning before the mandates hit, and I was like, there's no way people are going to buy into this. There's no way that people are going to believe that fabric can stop an airborne virus. I mean, that's like saying farts can be stopped by underwear. It's completely out of the realm of reality. And I told her, I'm not going to live somewhere where, very much like an Islamic extremist country, they force you to cover your face for no reason. And she said, Devin, I hate to tell you this, but I think that's going to be everywhere. Because she did watch the news. I didn't. I was just like, I'm not doing this. So then I had a wife that then sets a standard for me. She said, you better figure it out then. And then I have my daughter, Penny, who is beautiful. She's smart. She's happy. And we ended up finding out a friend of ours was abusing his wife behind closed doors. He was a youth pastor. He was supposed to be like a good person. And he was doing really awful things to his wife. And she tolerated that because that's what she was taught that a good wife does. And so as this all happened at the same time as the pandemic, I just came to a decision that no matter what words I say to my kids, they will follow my example. They will mirror my example. And there was no way I was going to show my daughter that anyone could make me do something that I did not believe in that was not good. Because I did not want her to ever be in a situation ever in her life where someone could force her to do something with her body that she did not believe in, that went against her values, and that was not good. I didn't realize what that was going to entail. I didn't realize how intense it was going to be, but I made the decision in the very beginning. And then to my boys, again, knowing that kids do not listen to what we say, they mirror what we do. I was never going to show them that that was the person that they should be. It's a person that gets power and makes people do things because they can, because they have enough power and they can threaten them enough in order to overpower them, in order to get people to do what they want, which in essence is the vaccine culture. So this is my why. This is why I then engaged in legal battles with the state for 5+ years and going. I have a Superior Court hearing next month. This is why I walked away from a $1 million clinic because I could no longer participate in the medical system that was part of this culture. This is why we purchased a 47-acre training and healing facility in the Dominican Republic and moved our entire family there to live there for multiple years. And this is why I dedicated my last 3 years of my life to equipping other people with the tools. Because it was the process of leaving the cult was inevitable. But I didn't have to get so beat up in the process. And that's my goal for equipping everyone that's on this workshop with, is to be able to go in peace. Like, accept the reality that you're no longer going to participate in this culture and have peace in it. So we have created multiple courses that have had a significant amount of research and time gone into them. Our first one is the tapped in immunity with Dr. Ben Tapper. He's a good friend of mine. He is labeled as one of the disinformation dozen, and he during the pandemic, yeah, he might have seen him on YouTube. If not, he's very passionate, and he came out to our facility in the Dominican Republic and led a online and live continuing education all about the research behind vaccines and immunology. And so it's a 5-hour continuing education, which is now an online course that you can watch. And again, this is not for someone that's actively wanting to be swayed one way. This is for people that are looking for information so they can feel good about their choice, right? I feel good about being someone that doesn't poison my kids. And people that vaccinate their kids and they're proud of it, they feel good being that person. So that's the goal, is give people information so they can feel really good about their choices, not to sway someone over. I'm all done arguing with people. Either God is speaking to you and you want to listen, or he is not. That is the truth I had to come to in order to have peace in this process of helping people. As number 2 is purpose. Oftentimes, what we noticed is that people would get dissuaded or broken down or fall back into the culture because they get sick or they're too busy, and a lot of it's to just appease social norms, right? So I wrote a book that will help anybody break free of the social norm responsibility. I should do this, right? I even named the book "Get Paid and Get Laid." So right there, just getting this book it breaks that within someone's brain, because no good person, no good, smart, kind, Christian, good, loving person is getting a book called "Get Paid and Get Laid." And that's the point. Jesus wasn't good. Jesus wasn't kind. Jesus called out snakes and he set the example and he healed. So that book is actually it's a 200-page training manual. So it's meant to, whatever your health and fitness and life goals are, how to, week by week, 2 weeks at a time, rewire your nervous system to get ultra focused on improving your health, improving your focus, improving your purpose. And then the third, the fully compliant, that is a course that I put on for chiropractors. So this is kind of a fun story. So I was reported to the government for not wearing a piece of fabric over my face. I was then investigated by the government, and I was very well versed in what the law is. As a doctor, my job is to manage and treat health conditions. 3 things negatively impact people's health: synthetic environment, inactivity, negativity. That's within my scope, my license. So when the government came to me and said, you are not following the rules, you aren't wearing masks, you don't have people wearing masks in your office, I said, I'm definitely following the rules. And the rules say that everyone is required to wear a facial covering unless they would have a negative health consequence for doing so. So if you ask yourself that question, knowing synthetic environment, inactivity, negativity, all having a negative health consequence, how many people have a negative health consequence for wearing a piece of fabric on their face? Is it synthetic? Are they being coerced into doing it? Is it causing fixation within their jaw and their upper cervical spine? Unless the person really loves it and that overrides the synthetic and inactive part, then the answer is yes, there is a negative health consequence. Same as if someone took lead paint and dripped it on their tongue. Just because you don't notice neurological damage occurring doesn't mean that it is not occurring. So I was investigated with this. I had this as my legal statement, and I was found to be fully compliant. And then I was asked if I would interview to be on the Department of Health. And so I did, and then I was chosen as the number 1 recommendation to the governor's office for the position on the Department of Health. And they said, "Hey, congratulations, Dr. Brossard. You've been picked. Everyone that we recommend to the governor, he always chooses who we recommend. So you got it. You got it. He's just going to run his due diligence on you, and then congratulations." And then 1 month later, I had a myriad of accusations with the professional equivalent of rape filed against me and all of my doctors. So I do not think the governor's office can tell people that they always approve who has been selected for them, because they did not choose me. Which again is what made me realize that this goes beyond healthcare, and it goes beyond science, goes to ideology, because the laws of healthcare are pretty concrete, and the pandemic showed us that those laws in healthcare actually kind of crossed over to the laws of ideology. And if you go to a doctor's office and you get medical services, before you get those medical services, they have to have you sign what's called an informed consent. And no one, to my knowledge, got an informed consent when they were told that they had to wear a facial covering all day from the moment they left their house to the moment they returned to their house. Yet it was a medical intervention that was given to you. So this course, and I could keep going on because again, this is why this is a shorter lecture, and this is these other courses that I have put together for you to give you confidence in your rights as far as what the law says and how that law was then impeded upon during the course of the pandemic. So not only do you have passion, not only do you have a step-by-step guidebook to help you reaffirm the purpose in regaining your health, you can have the confidence that you are doing the thing that is right, which means that in the future, when someone says, you have to do this, you can say with peace, no, I don't. Which then leads to the last one, which is my last book, which is a 300-page book, The Fog to Fire. And this is everything that you could possibly do to activate the vagus nerve and engage the prefrontal cortex. It is every neurohack that is known to man put in this book. Because you can have passion by cognitively knowing. You can have the step-by-step steps with defining your purpose. You can have confidence. But if you do not balance out the neuroanatomy, you will not feel peace, and your body will break down. And all of this, because you have made it through this full hour, is what I'm calling the player's package. So if you would like to take advantage of this, the tapped-in course, just $200, fully compliant, it's $400. You could get lucky, it's $20. Fog to Fire is $5. All these things we have sold and provide for other people and continue. And this is, by the way, doctor level education that we do continue education with. If you would like all of these and you would like to support our mission moving forward as we move into Superior Court hearing next month, for a $95 donation one time, you get lifetime access to all these things. So thank you for taking the time to empower yourself, to continue your walk away from the cult of vaccination. And my prayer is that your kids will be like my kids. So up to this point, there has been a lot of fighting that I've done, legal fighting, emotional fighting, just physical breakdown because of chronic stress. But when I look at my kids are happy. My kids play. My kids don't get sick. And when they get sick, they get better quickly. My kids interact with other kids that are different than them. My kids exude joy. And that's why I do what I do, so that my kids' generation, your kids, then have a chance to balance the neuroanatomy and then break free from this culture that has been created, and then create a new culture, a culture that is centered around these basic disciplines of Christ. So thank you again for your time. I apologize again for anyone that was coming in at 1 o'clock and I started late. And I will see if there's any questions that are left on the comments on the event, and then I'll be sure to answer those questions, or feel free to send me a message and I'll be happy to answer any other questions you might have. Thank you again. Hope to see you real soon.